Hey, I want to do an exercise real quick with you this morning. So take your worship flyer. If there's a pen, I think there's a pen in the chair right in front of you. I want to grab it. And I want everybody to do this. Participate with me for just a second. No, this is not burpees exercise. Some of you are going, we're going to exercise. No, I want to do an exercise. I want you to write, okay, just 5 letters across the top of your flyer, the first initial of 5 of your closest friends. Just real quick, right now, just don't even think about it, or maybe you have to think hard. I don't know. Hopefully you don't. Give me 5 letters up there. Just tell me, if not their whole name, because you're sitting next to somebody. If they aren't your closest friend, I don't want them to know. Hide it some way, but just think for just a second. Who are your 5 closest friends? Got it? Anybody not make it past 1? Because we will have a meeting for you in the back in a little bit. Really, seriously, we want you to have more than 1 friend. So there is a motivational speaker. Many of you have probably heard about this guy. His name's Jim Rohn, and he made this statement. He said, "We are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with." We are the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. In other words, if you take the 5 people that are closest to you, the 5 people you consider your closest friends, you're going to be an average of those people. Somebody else actually rewrote this statement, said it this way. I've heard it said this way: show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Kind of the same thought. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. In other words, the people you put around you are going to be the people that either help you succeed, help you move ahead in life, or they're going to be the people that hold you back a little bit. Whatever statement you resonate with, the intent is simply that the people we have closest to us are going to be the people we spend time with, are going to be the people that influence us the most. You are the average of those 5 closest friends. So whether you want to think about it or not, when it comes to how smart you are, or maybe even your looks, or how you dress, your money, your beliefs, maybe even your sports teams, you are the average, right, of the 5 closest people around you. Here's the thing. There is truth in that statement, but not completely. And let me tell you why, because it actually goes way beyond just 5. We like to think that it's just a small group. We like to think that we can control our environment and the people around us, and that will make our life better, but it's way more than just 5. A study was just completed off of a health study. There's this medical study that's been going on for over 30 years. It's one of the largest of its kind, and it looks at not just people, but family and friends. And these 2 men came along and they took all this research recently and they started to run it through several different grids, and they started to weigh the evidence and look at what was out there. And they discovered some things that just blew me away this week when I found this study. Let's start with something simple like our weight. When it comes to obesity, look on the screen, this is going to maybe shock some of you. When it comes to obesity, if you have a friend that's overweight, you're going to be 45% more likely to put on weight over the next 2 to 4 years as your friendship develops with that person. In other words, if they have a weight issue, you're 45% more likely to also have a weight issue. Now that makes sense, right? We just said friends influence friends. But watch this. If you have a friend who has a friend that is overweight, your percentage of gaining weight over the next couple of years is 20%. A friend of a friend. Not your friend, a friend of a friend. And here's the shocking thing. Let's take it out. They took it out one more step. A friend of a friend of a friend. You have a friend who has a friend who has a friend that you don't even know, and they're overweight. You're still 10% more likely to gain weight simply through that influence. That's shocking. Like, this is where they landed when they first started looking at this study, but as they started to study it more and more, it just kept growing. It's not just that the 5 closest people around us influence our lives. We have people that we don't know that influence our lives every day, and we may not be aware of it. Smoking. If you have a friend that smokes, you're 61% more likely to smoke. If you have a friend who has a friend that smokes, you're 29% more likely to smoke. If you have a friend who has a friend who has a friend, you're still 11% more likely to smoke. And they started pulling this stuff apart because they were shocked as they were discovering this. And they finally began to realize that for some reason, this level of influence doesn't stop at just your closest friends. Because as your friends make friends who make friends, what starts to happen is the perception gets adjusted. So all of your friends, their perceptions change, and their friends, their perceptions change, and eventually you're in that circle. And your perceptions change with the friends that are around you. Your friends really are your future. The most telling one of the whole study, this is the last one I'm going to give you, but I thought this was, this is just almost unbelievable, is the happiness factor. We all know that if you are around happy people, you're probably going to be happy, right? Anybody live with somebody who's not a morning person? Like you just let them get out of bed and do their thing. You hope they leave the house because if you get up and you bump into them, it's going to be unhappy for you the rest of the day. It's not that they're a bad person. They just don't like the morning, right? They have to drink 3 pots of coffee and probably have some Krispy Kreme donuts to get the sugar in their system. Look, when it comes to happiness, here's what they found, and this is shocking. Let's jump straight to the extreme. If you have a friend who has a friend who has a friend that's happy, you are 6% more likely to be happy. Now that seems like a really small amount, like 6%. Come on, is that really a big deal? But here's what they equated it to. Because they found from another study that if a person receives a $10,000 raise for their job, anybody want a $10,000 raise? Okay, there we go. We're taking nominations this morning. Yep. And I'm surprised how many people did not raise your hands. Like this, you guys are doing well. If you have a friend or you yourself get a $10,000 raise, let me show you this. It only increases your happiness by 2%, is what studies say. So if you have a friend who has a friend who has a friend that's a happy person, that makes you happier than if you got a $10,000 raise on average. Your friends really do matter when it comes to your future. And it's not just those 5. It's way bigger than that. It's all of our surroundings. Look, here's where we're going for the next few weeks. We live in a world where life is hard, right? Relationships are messy. The struggle is real. And we want to ask the question, how do we cope? What's it look like when we start to pull apart some of the most important relationships around us? What does it matter? How do we interact with people? Does that matter? Those relationships that are the closest to us, what should be our standards? How should we work this out, right? Because if you follow the logic of the study that I just read, right? If you follow the logic, right now, don't tell me you're not thinking about this. Every mom in here has already started creating a list of all of the kids that her kid is not going to play with, right? Right? You've already created that list because I just gave you the numbers. I gave you the numbers. Like to let a person who's a negative influence into your kid's life is going to be bad for your kids. So you just started cutting people off the list, right? Half the block no longer is safe at your house. They can't come over anymore, right? You get making the cuts right there. Some of us in business, right? Our business lives where we want to do well. And this used to be, I think, in culture that we would talk more to men about this, but let's be honest. Men and women excel in the business world in phenomenal ways today. And some of that is we have this drive where we want to do well. But the reality is, if we start to think those people could negatively impact our business, negatively impact our advancement in a company, then chances are we're going to try to not hang out with those people. We're not going to the lunchroom with that person, right? And you know who they are already. So you've got a list, and now you're cutting those people off. If you're a student this morning, you're already thinking about the people who might lower your GPA, right? Don't hang out with those people who are going to lower your GPA, right? Let's only put the people around us that are going to help us thrive, right? That's the natural outcome. When we look at this study, that's the natural place. It's where we have to arrive there. It doesn't make any sense to arrive anyplace else. But my question for you is that where we should arrive? Is that where we should be? Is that how we should think about living? When I say we, I'm saying if you want to consider Jesus Christ and the life he modeled for us, if you want to consider following him, then you have to ask the question, would he do it this way? Right? Life is hard. Relationships are messy. The struggle is real, but this is us. This is the church. This is who we are trying to figure out what makes sense. And instead of worrying about whether or not everybody's going to lower our average, what if we change things? What if we start worrying about how we can lift everybody else's average? What if we start embracing people more? What if we do realize that life is hard, right? Relationships are a struggle and things are messy and this real life is not easy. What if we realize that but we stop cutting people out. Because let's be honest, you ever been cut from something? Anybody ever been cut from an athletic team, maybe in junior high or high school? Maybe last week? It's the last time you go to that adult soccer league, not going there again. They cut me. It's not fun to get cut, right? It's not fun to be cut out of things. Think about your friendships. You ever been cut out of a friend circle? You ever been cut out of a family circle? How painful is that? And yet I know people in here this morning, we've all experienced that. Or we know somebody who has. Cut from a job. Oh yeah, it's just a cut. It's just that you need to change jobs, or the job has to make cuts for your department. It's nothing personal, but it's still a cut. It hurts, right? Are we going to be the average? Because if we are, we're going to just start making cuts. We have to. The research backs it up. If you want to thrive, you need to make cuts in your life. But I think there's a different way. We're going to look very quickly this morning at a couple of passages. We're going to start in the Old Testament, in the book of Proverbs. I love Proverbs. It is a collection of sayings. If you don't know that, you're going to think it's a schizophrenic book, because what happens is it goes like from verse 1 to verse 2, it changes, verse 3, verse 4. It's like every verse is like, it's not a novel. It's not a story. You follow me? It's a list of things. And the list was put together by a guy named Solomon. Solomon was considered to be a very wise man, and he put these lists together. And here's what he was doing. He would question values of the culture. He would question the meaning of life. He would ask hard questions, and he would reflect, and he would just put these like short, pithy little statements that he found to be generally true about life and walking with God. There is one overarching theme for the whole book of Proverbs. If you didn't know this, you can write it out in the margins. It's simply this: the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. That's it. The whole book boils down to that. That the fear of God, not fear like fright. I get it. Halloween's coming up. No, don't think like that. Not fright, fear. The wisdom of submitting my life to Christ is how I will thrive in life. That's all he's saying. And that's the whole book. Now, you know me. I like to push your envelope a little bit. So I'm going to read from Proverbs 17, but I'm going to read from a version that you don't have. So I put it on the screen. I didn't even put it in your flyer this morning. But we'll try it out. Here's this new version. Proverbs 17. A friend is someone you may or may not even be acquainted with, but who has accepted your friend request on Facebook and is now free to comment about all things in and around your life, as long as those comments make you feel good. Otherwise, you have the full etiquette of social media behind you in order to block and reject that person from your daily feed and continue to only view comments that make you feel better about yourself. This is the Facebook standard version. It is not in print yet. I'm pushing hard for it. Okay. Save it, right? Serious. Proverbs 17. Let's back up. See, the problem is we kind of think like that sometimes. We don't want to admit it. But I get wrapped up in social media enough that sometimes that definition, as I'm joking around, is actually pretty true about how I think. Proverbs 17, verse 17, though, Solomon said this. He said, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Okay, so let's pull it apart. Let's put just a couple of bullets about friendship. What is friendship? Friendship is first, it's a long-term commitment. It's a long-term commitment. Look at that verse. A friend loves at all times. You don't get to select the times. You don't get to choose only in the good times or the bad times, or only when you're making a lot of money and then you can take me out to eat a lot and pay for things, or you buy a beach house and then I'm your friend forever, right? And you don't get to choose those kinds of things. A friend is a long-term relationship, right? And the problem is, though, we live in one of the most transient times in history, though, if you think about it. Did you know that the U.S. Census Bureau says that every one of us will move at least 12 times on average in our lifetime? 12 times. That's shocking, because if you back up to like my grandparents, I think they moved 2 or 3, right? I mean, it just wasn't like that. And in half the time they were moving within the same little space, right? And they stayed together, families stayed together for a long period of time. And even 50 years ago, not that long ago, you could count on that in life. But now we're moving 12 times on average. We're soon going to be able to get to Houston from Dallas in about an hour or less. We live in an incredible age, but we are incredibly transient in this age, which means we're not taking time to get to know our neighbors. You know, statistically, I know that 30% of this room has never interacted with your neighbors. On either side, across the street, nothing. 30% of us in this room have never interacted with our neighbors one time. And I'm not trying to shame anybody. It's just a fact. We live in a culture that kind of supports that kind of attitude. It's constantly shifting, it's constantly changing, and it impacts our families the most. Listen, I've got a little commercial I'm about to plug right here. If you're married and you're looking to strengthen your relationship, our culture is not helping you. It doesn't help because we're so transient, and when we move around a lot, we're constantly changing, and when we change, believe it or not, we leave circles of friends that know us. And when we leave the people that know us the best, we move to people who don't know us, and then it's harder for them to catch up and ask us the right questions. Do you follow me? Right? Friendship's supposed to be a long-term commitment, but it's not happening like that. So just a little plug. Friday night, here, we're doing a marriage communication workshop. I'm going to tell you about it at the end of the hour again. But please, if you haven't signed up for that, if you are married, if you're looking to enhance your relationship, don't just wait for it to happen. It doesn't happen magically. I'll be married 30 years next year. My wife will tell you nothing's happened magically, and I'm the cause of most of that, but that's okay. Friendship is supposed to be long-term, and our culture works against that. It's not a criticism. It's just an observation. Friendship is supposed to be long-term. We have to learn to trust and enter into long-term relationships. Second, friendship's not based on ease either. It doesn't get to be just the best of times or the worst of times, right? A friend loves at all times. All times. So whatever the highs and the low are in your life, friendship has to outlast that. That's what Solomon said. The turbulence doesn't matter. We're going to have turbulence, right? I heard somebody recently tell me, they said, I'm kind of backing away from my family. So that's interesting. And more about that. They said, well, there's a lot of drama, right? There's a lot of drama in the family, and it impacts my family. And we talked it through. And there may be times when you have to do that, right? Don't ever hear me say that you should just let any and everything into your life. That's not what I'm saying. But at the same time, understand there's drama in all of life, right? So we have to, as friends, we have to begin to decide, how are we willing to walk with people in the hard times? A friend loves at all times. If somebody doesn't love you all of the time, not that they agree with you all of the time, not that they support everything you did all of the time, if I'm going to pull really something stupid, I want somebody to walk up and tell me, hey, don't do that first. That's a good friend to me. That's a loving friend. But they don't back away just because I'm getting ready to blow my life up, right? And yet that's what we tend to do in our culture. We always want to gravitate towards the easy stuff. So what is it? Friend is a long-term relationship. A friend is not based on ease. And third, a friend is beneficial to life. Look at the last part of that verse. A brother is born. Brother, ladies, you're included in that. A brother is born for adversity. Friends are made for adversity. Relationships are for adversity. The world is broken. We keep talking about how messy life is. Solomon wrote this thousands of years ago. He didn't have the study I read a while ago. He didn't have all the information. He didn't have doctors saying, yeah, you're right. He just realized we were made for relationship. We were made to walk in community together. And that part of life, this broken world, means that to be in friendship, to be in relationship, is to walk through adversity. There is a benefit to having a friend when life gets messy. If you don't have a friend, the messiness of life will consume you. It's too heavy. The things we go through in this world are heavy. It's hard. The mistakes we even make, and we don't want to own it, but we do. We make little mistakes along the way, and they're heavy, right? Because we know we've messed up. We need friends to help us carry that stuff. Friends are necessary part of life. If life's going to get messy, you need to have a friend that will walk with you through the messiness of life. Some of the best research that I read these days is actually coming from research from insurance companies. And it's amazing because they're trying to study and figure out how life can be better for people. Because they know that a healthy person is going to cost them less in the long run, right? And so Cigna is actually one of the insurance companies that is running a ton of research like this. And last week they had they had a piece of research come out that was actually connecting the dots on a bunch of different things, but looking specifically at loneliness. You know, loneliness is now considered an epidemic in our country. Not only is it an epidemic, they say it's health-wise the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's what they're saying. That it's that bad for you. That loneliness is now rated as being a bigger health threat than obesity in our country. Did you know that? That's amazing to me to read that kind of stuff. That loneliness is that consuming. They say it gives you heart disease, depression, anxiety, and dementia even. That it accentuates all of those illnesses. Now think about that. In some ways, we live in the most connected generation ever, and yet we are now hearing we are the loneliest generation ever. And it's at such epidemic levels with our young people that they're creating a whole new category for people in their teens and 20s because they're that alone. And I don't even know if we know it, right? The very people who could bring your average down in life are also the people who are necessary for life. Let me say that again. The people who could bring us down in life, our averages, you know, that thing where we want to be great, the very people who are going to bring us down are the people who are necessary for life. We have to have relationship. So how do we bridge this gap? Right? How do we deal with the idea that we're actually going to be making friends with people who are going to be hurting us at times? That their mess is going to touch our lives, or their friend's mess is going to touch our lives, or their friends' their mess is going to touch our lives. I want to take you to something Paul said. And you got to remember, every time I quote Paul, I have to tell you this because I think it's important. When Paul writes something to Christians, to the church, we got to remember that Paul, for the most of his life, hated Christians. Like he actively sought to do away with Christians. So when he had this conversion, when he had a change of heart, a change of mind, it radically flooded his soul. And in Hebrews 10, he's talking to the church, but what he says is God's ideal for humanity. You have to know that. Yes, it applies in the church, but we have to think bigger than the church. We have to think about the communities we live in. And he says this, verse 24, Hebrews 10, he says, and let us consider, talking about people in the church. So when you showed up here this morning, he says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to consider how to stir one another up to love and good works. I want you to consider, I want you to be thinking as you drive to meet together with this group of body of believers, I want you to always be thinking about, what are you going to say to that person? If this person's here, if this friend is here, if this acquaintance is there, what are you going to say to them that will inspire them to love and good works? Not, you know what, I talked to you about this last week. We got to talk about it again. I saw you out there in the parking lot having that cigarette. All right. We got to cut that out, right? Not that. He doesn't say show up and start telling them everything they did wrong in their lives. He says, I want you to think about what you're going to say because it's that important that you're there. You're their friend. What are you going to say that inspires them to greatness, to love and good works? Not neglecting, verse 25, the meeting to meet together as is the habit of some. This is a passage that's hard for me as a pastor because it sounds a little self-serving when I say, hey, God wants you to be there on Sundays, right? He wants you to show up on Sundays. I think that sounds self-serving sometimes. I think it sounds like, some people hear that, they go, oh, he just wants a big crowd, right? Pastor's taking a head count. He gets together on Monday morning with the rest of his pastor friends, and they're all comparing head counts, and he's tired of being the last in line. We're not the last. But see, that when he says that, it's not the pastor standing up saying, you need to show up on Sunday mornings because if you don't, God's going to be mad at you. If you don't, the pastor's going to be mad at you. If you don't, you're going to lose your salvation. He says, why? When you walk through the door, somebody's been thinking about how to stir you up to love and good works, so get through the door. It's important. And not only that, maybe you're the one who's been thinking about how to approach somebody else and stir them up to love and good works. Look what he says. But encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Listen, friendship causes us to run towards people instead of away from people. True friendship, biblical friendship, the way Jesus sets up friendship, it has nothing to do with whether or not you have all of these things in common. It's easy. Look, I get it. It's easy to build a group around people that love to go to the beach. You notice how I always stick on that one. That's just my thing, right? It's easy to build a group that gets together once a week, says, "Hey, we're going to meet and talk about how we can have more fun at the beach next year." Because I like the beach, and people that like the beach, we want to all be together. We have the same interest, right? Paul didn't say anything about that. He talks about building this friendship and running towards people that may not even be like us. Run towards people instead of away from people. That's what friendship is. Don't neglect meeting together. Friendship is, I said it this way, and I think I put this in your nose, friendship is face-to-face. It's face-to-face. It's not face-to-Facebook. I like Facebook. I do. My wife says I stay on it too much. I keep up with friends that I haven't seen in 20, 25, 30 years. Are we really friends? I don't know. It's an acquaintance. But real friendship is face-to-face. It's not face-to-screen. It's not face-to-Facebook. And the studies keep telling us that. Another study I read this week. If you walk around your office and you need to have a conversation with somebody and your cell phone is in your hand, do you know that statistically they tell us the person you're talking to doesn't believe that you even care for them? When you have a conversation with somebody just by holding it in your hand, they're just saying, put it in your back pocket, put it in your coat pocket, put it whatever, just put it out of sight, leave it on the shelf in your office. But just by holding it in your hand, people interpret that as you don't even care about me. A few years ago, a couple of guys, we get together and we talk ministry a bunch of times a year. And we started this little thing where everybody's cell phone goes in the middle of the table, upside down, so you can't see it. And the first person who picks up their phone actually has to buy everybody else's meals. Man, we sit there all day because ain't nobody picking that up. We're all pastors. We don't have that kind of money. But think about it. Friendship is face-to-face. It calls the best out of people. Paul says it's how do I motivate people? How do I empower people? Yes, life is messy. Yes, it's hard. Yes, real world is a wreck. But we don't have to cut people out of our lives. We just need to think differently. Right? When we think the average of the people are trying to bring our average down, we need to think about how we can bring everybody else's averages up. I said it this way, don't worry about your friendship average bringing you down. Focus on lifting the average of other people's lives by friending those in need. Friend those in need. Go after the people that need friends. Make a difference. Change the world. We keep hearing about changing the world, and I think our young people are consumed with changing the world. They think you have to be like a YouTube star to do that. You change the world by changing your surroundings, your environment, your family first, your home, your block, your city. Start there. Don't worry about these people that are going to pull you down. Don't worry about that. Think to yourself, how am I lifting the average of everybody else? That's the kind of friend we're called to be. That's what Christ modeled for us. If he had waited for us to be perfect, he would have never come to earth. He would have never had the opportunity to sacrifice his life. He would have never given us the forgiveness that we now have accessible through him. And by the way, as he was doing that, his own guys, his disciples, his people, they just kept messing up right and left, right? They'd ignore him. They wouldn't pay attention. He'd get frustrated. He'd have to tell them things 3 and 4 times. Several times in the Gospels, you'll read statements like, come on, did you not hear me the first time? Let me say it to you again. How frustrated must he have been? If he was, he didn't show it. Right? We need to think about friendship this way. So what do you do with this? You're not the average of the 5 people around you. It's actually bigger than that, which means your life is helping somebody else somewhere, some way, right? So the question really is, who's God put in your sphere? Right? Who's he put in your circle of influence that you can influence today? Start at church. Start with the people that are the closest to you. that claim the same belief system sometimes. Not everybody here does. I get it. But we're all looking, right? I mean, you wouldn't be here if you weren't at least a little intrigued with who this Jesus person is. Stop worrying about who's bringing your numbers down. Start focusing on bringing everybody else's numbers up. That's who we want to be. This is us. This is who we want to be, Journey. This is us. So it's going to get messier, right? But that's okay. That's okay. Because friendships are necessary when life gets messy. Without it, it's too big of a burden. Let me pray for us.